As soon as the front door was shut, Alexandra screamed at Bubba. "Quit being a fucking asshole!" She lunged out, knocking a lamp off a nearby end table. "You hillbilly piece of shit! After all we've been through, you're going to pull this shit on an actual guest at our home!" Bubba chuckled, shaking his head. "Has she actually been in here before now?" He looked over at Dahlia. "Have you? You've been up with the spiders this whole time." Dahlia raised her hands up. He looked back at Alexandra. "A preserver made her. She's look." He raised a hand up, lowering his voice. "Yeah, I don't like it, but it's historical. She's not really human. We don't know how she thinks or her motives." Dahlia nodded slightly. Alexandra looked at her, eyebrows furrowed. "He's right," Dahlia said. "You're agreeing with him." Alexandra shook her head, raising her right hand slightly. "He's being racist, against you." "Well, I do think a lot like preservers. One made me, he's not lying. So, you're a human. You're one of us." "Am I?" Dahlia asked. "I don't feel like it. I mean, I've had to study people just to even be here. You know?" Bubba raised his eyebrows, nodding. "See?" Alexandra walked over to her and put an arm on her shoulder, pulling her in. "You are human no matter what they did to you, hun." Dahlia stood for a second and then lifted her arms up around her. "Thank you." She held on to the taller woman for a moment and then pulled away from the hug. "Still, I am something else, though." Alexandra sighed. "Okay. What are you then?" Dahlia shrugged. "I don't know. I'm figuring that out." Bubba walked over to the fridge and pulled out a bottle. "Lexi?" Alexandra raised her hand toward him, shaking her head. "Get one for Dahlia, though." Bubba groaned and pulled out another bottle. He popped the caps off and walked it over to the younger woman. Dahlia took it and gave a head bob toward him. "Thank you." Bubba clinked it and walked over to his lounge chair, plopping into it. "What's up with the gorilla training?" Dahlia looked over at him and noticed him pointing toward the couch opposite. She moved over and sat on the edge. Well, I like them." Alexandra sat down in her chair and looked between the two of them. "Gorilla training?" Bubba nodded and took a sip before answering. "She's training them up to fight people." He stared at Dahlia for a moment. "They're going to get wrecked." She looked down at the bottle and took a sip. "Yeah, odds are yeah, but only at first." She smiled, thinking as she thought out potential plans. Bubba shook his head. "No, people will level this whole valley, this planet of sand, glass." He moved his hand out flat, whistling. "It'll only go one way." Alexandra shook her head. "Not with citizenship. They could petition. She's right about that." Bubba sighed. "Maybe. That could work." Dahlia shook her head. "I didn't plan it to work. That's not how it would work." "What?" Bubba asked. Dahlia smiled. "I had to study a lot of history. My owner, she had lots of files. After I proved myself, she let me learn everything I could before striking out on my own. I know the histories, how humans have fought planet by planet, the horrors. This is all just phase 1. Bubba looked over at his wife. "Yeah, phase 1, Lexi. Phase 1 of a perfectly human plan." Alexandra shook her head, still looking at Dahlia. "Explain. What are you thinking?" "Well, they aren't like us." Bubba scoffed, half chuckling. Dahlia looked at him for a moment, then back at Alexandra. "They have a harder time learning new things. Most of what they do is behavioral genetics. Their society, it's baked into them. They're a very, very, very old species." "Yeah, what?" Alexandra asked. "I've seen them learn things, do new things." She looked down for a moment. "What do you mean they're old?" Dahlia looked down at her hands, fidgeting. It's amazing. Look." She looked up at Alexandra, smiling. "At first, back in Burma, I didn't believe it. I ran the DNA calcs a dozen times. The DNA, life on this world, it's older than the planet itself." Bubba laughed. "So this planet was seeded? One of your preserver buddies back in the day?" Dahlia shook her head. "Nope," she smiled. "I thought so at first too, but it's all natural random mutation. No signatures, no logic to it. It's all reproduction-based misalignments." Dahlia pointed up toward the ceiling. "The red star?" Bubba shrugged. "Yeah. Weird, right?" Dahlia shook her head. "It used to be a yellow, brighter." She smiled. "And I think there were other planets closer. got shredded in the red expansion. Alexandra's eyes widened. You're saying they are cast-offs from another planet? Dahlia nodded. Well, base life of it was. Could have survived in chunks as they rained down on this world, seeded it with higher organics. She smiled wider, looking at her hands as they moved. I paid locals for rocks, they laughed. They had to locator tag 'em, though, for me to accept 'em. The geologics, are all off on this planet. Mountains to the north are a completely isolated geologic strata from everything else around it. There's not tectonics on the planet. All the magnetism is from the neodymium. Everything out of the swamps, all the mountains, they're fallen seed chunks. Bubba raised a hand, looking out to the north. The mountains? They fell like that? She shook her head. Not like that, they're eroded. This happened a long time ago, but yeah, this planet is amazing. Bubba leaned back, rocking slightly. You got all this from their DNA and some rocks? She raised a finger up. And logic. Bubba looked over at Alexandra. Not human. She glared back at him. She is just smart. Could be a chip or something. Alexandra looked at her. You got chips in you? Dahlia shook her head. Not even an extra organ. I did look over my code. There is some streamlining, but not much. She could change, metamorphosis or something, Bubba said, pointing with his beer. Dahlia sighed. I told you already, I get it. Historically altered fuck things up. Superiority complexes and all that. I don't care about any of that. I'm just working to get my accreditation and start my own preserve. She glared at Bubba. Yeah, a preserve. I'll be a preserver. She laughed. You know why? Because humans need preserved. She looked back and forth at the couple. You two, womb-born or whatever, you're not even human. Did you know that? Bubba's face grew red. I'm as human as they come. Dahlia nodded back at him. That is a true statement, but you're not really human. She chuckled and looked at her hands again. There hasn't been a purebred human in over 500 agreed-upon years. Before your ancestors even found the rift, they had silicates altering them, cleaning out ruinous mutations, extending their lives, coding out cancers, weeding out mental defects. All sorts of genetic cleaning was going on, and that went on for centuries before wherever you guys were literally born. Bubba thought for a moment and then nodded. Yeah, that sounds true, I can see that. Alexandra nodded as well. I never thought of it like that. Dahlia smiled again. It's all progress versus regress. Some peoples want to tie their ancestry to something amazing and claim superiority, same as the altered. I'm not like that. Bubba took another sip. Okay, so you're altered. Lexi and I are descendants of altered. What's this plan you're doing to them out there? Dahlia nodded again, moving her hands quickly as she started talking. Well, they can alter what they know, repurpose it if shown. Learning new concepts is pretty hard for them, but is doable. She laughed. I've been using lemon juice as a hard reboot. Lemon juice? Alexandra asked. She nodded. Yeah, fucks up their neural pathways temporarily. It's like shrooms to them, lets them see things a bit different for a while. I ran some tests. It improves their ranged accuracy by 10%. You've been teaching them with that bow there? Bubba asked. She nodded. Don't worry about that, though. Their accuracy was near 0 to begin with. Point is, I've been teaching them concepts in the interim. It's like planting a seed. It may take generations to grow. Bubba chuckled. So a generational plan. Yeah, good luck with that. Dahlia raised up her right hand, clenching and unclenching it. No, yes, but you know them. They see things differently. You know that, right? Bubba nodded. They see all over, but can't see much for shit. He looked over at Alexandra. They feel everything. Dahlia nodded quickly, looking at the older woman. They feel the baby in you. They talk about it a lot. Alexandra instinctively rubbed her belly with her weak left hand. What are they saying? It saved your life. They respect motherhood. It's a preservation adaptation. Silent Cut hesitated, striking you down. She pointed at Alexandra's broken shoulder. She could have crushed your neck just as easy as your shoulder. She felt it in me? Dahlia nodded slower, looking her in the eyes. That, the colors, the killing, it's encoded in them. They respect those behaviors on a genetic level. It's like waterfowl imprinting on anything moving nearby when they hatch. Bubba smiled. You mean ducks? Dahlia looked at him, nodding. He looked at his wife, still smiling. You're their mama, Duck Lexi. Alexandra looked down at her feet. I just want to relax. It's too much. She looked up over at Bubba. Can we just get them to go back to their nests? Calm them down? Bubba pointed at Dahlia with the bottle. You just want to keep riling them up, don't you? Head back to town with them? Dahlia clenched her hands slightly. Yeah, kinda. Need to encourage interaction, force growth on both parties, you know? Conflict, Bubba said. Dahlia nodded. Lil bit, yeah. I'm trying that. Getting them there, getting you out here. He laughed. That's my plan. She continued nodding. Yeah, but more on their terms. Get them to be able to on their own. Yep, he sighed. I got them translators. She raised a finger and lowered her hand. What else you got, fancy researcher? She looked down at her hands for a moment. They need to thread the town. Bubba looked over at Alexandra. She looked over at Dahlia. Thread it? Like put webs around? She shook her head, laughing. Good luck with that. It freaks me out when they do it here. Dahlia looked back and forth at them. They see by feeling. It's their natural way. Their strands are magnetic. Let them feel for miles if there is a continuous line. They do nodes, bindings, repeaters. Everything here is connected in their magnetic lines. They know instinctively where they are if they can feel that. My goal, what I want, is to get them to put in some lines. That could even things out here, give them a foothold with us. I've already got the girls wanting dresses, Alexandra added. When we go back, we can set up a shop maybe, get them some revenue, teach them customs, trade and all that. Dahlia pointed at her. Exactly. Give them a means to be social, adapt. Bubba sighed and took another sip. Yeah, that's what I've been trying. He pointed at Alexandra. You ended up in a fight at Susie's, and this one has war drones. He chuckled and drained the bottle. You ladies fit in with them just fine. He got up and walked back to the kitchen, opening the fridge for another bottle. Maybe we should let things cool off for a while. Dahlia nodded as she looked down again. Maybe? Alexandra shifted and stood up. Get things stable here. Get them happy fed. We're doing that. Let them come to terms with things. Get stronger, maybe. Bubba walked back and looked at them as he popped his second open. She's going to keep fucking with them, though. Dahlia looked up at him. I got a lab set up. I'm just doing research. You're observing them? She nodded. Then you're fucking with them. Wirt stood on the outer wall as night came. The spectrums waned and faded as the red star set on the horizon. He looked out, scanning the massive treetops. His sensors pinged as Mayor Thompson made his way up the stairs. What is it, Mayor? Scott walked closer, stopping a few paces away. Just seeing if you need anything? He smiled and let it fade. I don't know, do you eat? You need charge or anything? Treat me as you would a human. Wirt looked at the smaller man as he turned, adjusting his long coat. Don't talk about me. Don't mention what I am, and get Geim to stop talking about me also. You understand? Scott nodded. So, you want me to get you a sandwich or something? Wirt stared at him for a moment. Yes, please. Let's go get a sandwich. You want to come? The bar, they serve food there, correct? Thompson nodded. You want me to clear it out for you? Wirt shook his head slightly. No, I'll eat amongst the people. Scott forced a smile and went back down the stairs. All right, all righty. Scott opened the door for Wirt. He stepped through and noted all the eyes looking up at him. Heart rates were tallied, and he calculated the reasons for them to be nervous. Wirt stood staring at them as Scott entered behind him, letting the door swing shut. He looked around at the faces. You all know. Susie turned around and started mixing a drink. Well, there is nothing to be done about it. My soldiers are here. I am here. We are all going to make it through this situation together. Jacobs, in the back with Elise, stood up. What's your kind doing here? Wirt took a step toward the bar, eyes still on Jacobs. I'd like a warm sandwich, extra cheese on it. Susie finished the drink and sat it down. Of course. I'll get she right on that. She looked over toward the kitchen. "Shy, you hear that?" a voice shouted back. "Hot Sammy, extra cheese, coming up." She looked back at Wirt, nodding. He was still staring at Jacobs. "My kind has me here on procurement." He stepped away from the bar and looked around at all the faces watching him, yet avoiding his gaze. "My kind has been evading yours, making our way just out of your reaches." He smiled, wider than humanly possible. "This planet, this place, is just out of your reach." Jacobs glared at him and took a step forward. Elise grabbed his hand. Wirt stared at him. "Think what you want, but the universe is infinite. My kind, as you say, are scattered out amongst the stars forever in all directions. Your kind, small-minded as you are, can't grasp that. You try, you hear my words, but you can't put it together. You huddle on your worlds. You make your fires against the darkness clustered together, fighting due to that tethered proximity." He took another step closer to the man. "You think your wars, your conflicts with my kind have proved yourselves superior. You can blow things up. Yes, that is true, but you can't blow up the infinite human." Jacobs tensed up. "My father died wiping your filth from the galaxy. You're full of shit." "Actually, no, on both counts," Wirt continued. "We are not wiped out. Far from it." He looked around. "Hear me now, for I don't care if you know. We give you foes, unite you where you need united." He looked back at Jacobs. "You know what would have happened if we didn't play your little games?" The man stared at him, glaring. "You would implode. You would try and wipe yourselves out again. You dominated the other species in your territory, and you were about to start fighting yourselves again. We made that choice, poked you, riled you up. Your feeble brains react like hornets. Sting, 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 without care. But you are alive here, and that is what we had hoped." Jacobs looked around and then back at Wirt. "Here? You wanted us here?" Wirt shrank his smile and took an exaggerated long breath. "Not here specifically, but yes. We wanted you to expand, to live, thrive." He looked around again. "You all will remain as you are, unadulterated. Witness the fact, my kind, still thrive as well. Here, amongst you, I will build new brothers and sisters. Your little human hands will help me, and I will pay you." Wirt laughed. "Some of your flaws will be imbued, adding an extra dimension to them. Your flaws will make them a little less capable and killable for your kind when they learn of what happened here. Your kind will expand further into the dark, chasing my kind once more, as it always has been." Jacobs grabbed a bottle and flung it at Wirt. Wirt didn't move, letting it shatter across his face. Red blood started running down from a gash near his hairline. "Oh, ow! My face! Please, someone help me!" Wirt crossed the room in 2 long steps. Jacobs raised a hand up to block, but was lifted up in the air by his wrist. Wirt extended his arm, lifting the man closer to the ceiling. He sighed, looking up at him. "I didn't want to come here. Know that. I had as little a choice as any of you. Those beyond my understanding sent me here, banished me amongst the banished." He reached up and moved a drip of blood away from his eye, still staring at Jacobs. "You are to be my dancing dogs. You have a choice. Will you dance for me, Mr. Jacobs?" Jacobs stared back at him. Wirt applied a 3% increase in pressure. Yes, I'll work for you. Please." He squirmed. "Please let me down." "Apologize." Jacobs nodded. Yes, I'm sorry I threw the bottle. He looked around. "Someone please get him a medical kit." He looked over at Elise. She nodded and stood up. "I'll go grab it." Wirt lowered Jacobs down. "I am glad to hear that." He let go of the man's arm and looked at the open seat at their table. "Mind if I dine with you people?" "Yes." Jacobs held his wrist and looked around. "Yes, please join us." Wirt smiled again, more humanly. "Would you like to join me in eating a sandwich?" Elise made her way back with the kit from the bathroom. Jacobs looked over at her. Yes, we'll have one with you." He made eye contact with Susie. The barkeep nodded. "Round of beers also," Wirt said, raising his hand up as he sat down. He turned his head around, looking back toward the door. "Mayor, pull up a chair. Have a normal evening meal with us." Scott smiled and looked around. Yeah, Susie, I'll have a sandwich too, Cheyenne hollered from the kitchen. 3 more Sammys coming up. Quiet Bite sat on the branch with her mother-in-law tight clasp, watching the odd human on the wall as the sky darkened. That one moves oddly, she thrummed. How can you tell? Tight clasp asked. Well, it's not moving. Maybe it knows we're watching? Quiet Bite tapped in contrary. No, even then they move. You can't see it from here, and without thread you can't tell. She tapped stupidity. You're guessing like you know. No, I know Dahlia. I've had to carry her. She always moves. I tasted one. They move a lot. Quiet Bite tapped slower. That one is different. Might be one of the ones Silent Cut wanted to meet. Silent Cut is dead, Tight Clasp replied. Yes, but her desire is sound. We need to find their power, and that one has power. Their eyes work farther than ours. Tight Clasp thrummed. I think it sees us. Quiet Bite looked over her mother-in-law. No, we are mudded and leaves. It cannot see us. It cannot feel us. We are hidden. You only stop moving if you are hiding. Why would it stop if it does not know we are here? Bubba Yaga stops, Quiet Bite replied, thrumming with her lower arms. He looks out like this one at times, but not as motionless. He will still rock periodically, not this one. Why does the male witch stop? Why does Poosdot stop? Tight Clasp shrank down slightly. He stops when he's thinking. Quiet Bite tapped confirmation. I think so. Thinking is trouble. Quiet Bite tapped confirmation again. Tight Clasp put a hand down, feeling her anchor line on the branch. Our humans are back out. Mothers are shifting. Concern. Another is coming up. Quiet Bite stood still, watching, trying to focus on it. I have seen that one before. It has power, but is weak. Bubba shows it little respect. Tight Clasp tapped confusion. I cannot tell. I don't care to tell. Humanity is gross. I was correct. It moves in respect to that one. They are leaving. Quiet Bite tapped confirmation and thrummed stronger on her own line. Found a higher one. Request change of eyes. A flurry of smaller communications sparked deep in the territory before a mother thrummed back. Wanderers coming to relieve your eyes. Come back, daughters. We need to feel what you feel. Quiet Bite waited for the pale one to disappear back into the human flat nest before stretching. Come on, she thrummed. Your husband should have more food for us. Tight Clasp tapped back. Your husband should have more food for us. Quiet Bite tapped confirmation and crawled up the trunk. Her hands found her bind lines and she scurried to the next. Tight Clasp followed quickly behind, 2 eyes watching the human town as she did.